today's video is going to be a little different. It's very early in the morning here at the SEC today, and I have a lot planned for the day, and I guess I'll fill you guys in on that. The first thing I'm going to do this morning is actually go get my new horse, Fisher, and bring him in, and this would be his first time here, and hopefully it's going to be a temporary stay because I'm planning on moving into a new facility, a facility of my own to be more specific, because it's my dream and I finally saved enough for it to finally happen. And that is basically what this video is going to be, and I'm going to take you guys along with me while I explore a bunch of different facilities and barns to find out what suits my needs the most. This is my most recent addition, Songbird's Limit, or Fisher, and he's a 2018 𝘾𝘅 gelding, standing at 15.2 hands, and he is very fresh off of his first eventing show, and I'm hoping to steer him closer to jumpers as his main prospect, but he is really sweet, and he's just come in today, and I'm just so thrilled that I finally got him in my hands. And this morning I just went ahead and unloaded him and put him rather in isolation in the barn, an empty stall, like 2 stalls away from some of the other horses, because I don't want him to get uncomfortable, as he does take a little while to warm up around other horses and people and places, which hopefully he won't have to warm up too much to the SEC since maybe we'll be moving soon. So my goal is for him to take this barn as a hotel rather than a home. So the first place I ended up visiting was the Hollowwoods Equestrian Center, which my first impression was that it was just breathtaking. It was absolutely gorgeous. The trees, the foliage, everything about this place was just so beautiful. I felt like I was intruding. The reason that this place was up for sale was because the owner was going off to college and just couldn't take care of the barn anymore, and I actually ended up meeting her. I just asked for a few directions around the place to figure out where I was going and just general information on the barn, like pricing and dates and papers and such. She was very sweet, and she was very nice to talk to. She gave me all my answers. The pricing was actually relatively good for the year that the area was constructed, which was definitely a green flag, but I still didn't know how I was feeling about this area because I did want to take a look around, and she was very helpful. Like I said, she told me where everything was and even handed over some of the papers just to let me look over them, which was very nice of her. So I ended up saying bye to her, and I headed into the barn, which was pretty small. It was pretty cramped. There was a door to the left that led to a larger barn, but I didn't end up going in there. There were 4 horses on the outside stalls of the barn, and I just went and I took a look at a few of them just to, check the conditions and everything. It was pretty cold where I was, but the horses didn't seem to mind that much, which was good. And it wasn't until I visited this mare who caught my eye. I went ahead and looked at her. I didn't find a name, but I did say hi and I gave her a pet because she was just so beautiful. But I pulled myself away from her and checked out the rest of the property, which was massive and beautiful. There was foliage everywhere, and just, it was like a fairy tale to walk through the area. It was very heavily vegetated. There were flowers and plants everywhere, which is definitely my kind of place, but still something felt off. There was a massive bridge that constructed to the other side of the area. It looked like it was very old and had a lot of history to it, but I didn't spend too long reminiscing on what the possible origins of the bridge could be. There was a few outdoor paddocks on this side of the facility, along with some homes, like houses for either owners or trainers or full-time boarders, whatever, I guess. There was also a massive waterfall on the side, considering a river ran through the property, which was very pretty. It was very cold though, and I did get a little splashed, but I didn't mind too much because of how beautiful the area was. I ended up just walking around the home areas, and one house in particular caught my eye. It was really big. I assumed it was where the owner lived, and I just took a quick look at it because I really thought it was pretty. The whole area must have been constructed in the early or mid 1900s, and everything still looked completely sturdy. Like I said, the river that ran through here, the Silversong River, was absolutely beautiful. I took another look at the barn and the outside areas, and then I headed up to where the cross-country trail was, which was just a little walks away, and it was very beautiful. The river ran through the cross-country trail as well, so there were tons of bridges. It was a massive trail. I'd been to the cross-country track before, showing and everything, but I'd never really paid enough attention to it. But it really, really was beautiful, and I just had an amazing time. I ended up at the main arena, which was also very big, and I decided to list off a few pros and cons of the area, and here is my list. So the pros of the Hollowwoods Equestrian Center would be that it is very heavily vegetated and very, very pretty, has a good price, and has a massive facility. The cons would be that it is relatively far away from a bunch of other areas, and that might make it harder to travel. Another con was that it was very, very cold, and that the barn wasn't as big as I'd hoped it would be, which it could be expanded, but barn expansions tend to cost a lot of money, and I wasn't sure how much money I would have after purchasing the place. Another con was that this sounds picky, but it just didn't feel right to me. I don't know how to explain it. It just felt strange to me, and I never found out why. And I guess another pro would be that there was a very beautiful horse, but yeah, those are the pros and cons. So this next place on the list was definitely a pity viewing. I saw it in an ad as an abandoned farm from an old family called the 𝑒w family, and I just immediately felt bad and wanted to at least go give it a look, even though the ad was pretty much what I saw when I got there. It was overgrown, and the buildings were just generally gross, and when I walked into the first barn, it was completely empty, and so I just looked around and I noticed that the foundation was just completely rotted away. And so I just left and I headed into the next barn, which was even worse than the first. The second I walked into the second barn, my jaw just dropped, and I felt so upset the second I walked into that barn. It was mostly empty except for one stall that held a malnourished looking Mustang in it, and I was just so upset. I felt so bad, and I went up to the horse, and I was really careful not to spook her at all. She didn't seem very skittish, but I could tell that she was malnourished and just not well at all. And I wanted to at least give her a tiny vet check to make sure that she wasn't, on death's row. She was fine when I went up and just gave her a few pets and looked her over. She didn't have anything immediately wrong with her other than being malnourished and cold. Other than that, she just was very beautiful, and I immediately sent a text to the owner of the property, and I was like, there is a horse on your property, and they said, yeah, we know, we've been trying to get rid of her. And I was just like so upset, but I did end up looking around the rest of the property for pity once again, and I just could not stop thinking about that horse, and I felt so bad, but I tried to brush past that and try to find the beauty in the place. It was a relatively small farm with a tree orchard. I don't even know what kind of trees they were. All I know is that whatever they were growing was not growing anymore. There were a few arenas and pastures, but they were all overgrown completely, and I could tell that this place was once beautiful, but it certainly needed a lot of work, and if I were to buy it, even for the cheap price that it was listed at, the amount of renovation that it would take would not be worth it. I really did try to look on the bright side, but I don't think there was one, and the only way I knew my way around the place was because the owner had just texted me some simple directions. I didn't even get to talk to anyone, but I do wish that hopefully someone someday will come and tidy this place up and give it some personality, because it was beautiful, but it needed so much work. So much more work than I could ever provide for this place, as I did not have enough funds, considering that the buildings that were up would most definitely have to be torn down. At this point, I went up the hill and headed to the only massive arena, which, although it was big, was still quite overgrown and some fences were broken. But this is where I made my pros and cons list. So for the pros, the place was right by water and right across from more land on the other side of the river, so transportation to central 𝘰𝘃 would be relatively easy. The land was cheap, and there were multiple buildings that could be used, but the cons were that the area was pretty small, and the only buildings that could be used were in need of serious renovation in terms of would have to be torn down. And the pastures and arenas would all need new work as well, and I really was not in that price line at that point. I texted the owner about the horse, and I will definitely give you guys some updates on that. The next area was practically right around the corner, and it was labeled as a repurposed summer camp, which was interesting, and I was a little skeptical at first. It was a tiny island right off of moorland with nothing but a small bridge in between, and the sign was labeled 𝘰𝘃 Riding Camp. So I headed in with hopefully better feelings than the last area, and the place was beautiful. Although it was a small area of land, it was gorgeous, and it had a stable temperature. There were many pastures, a large arena, there were trailers everywhere. The horses looked well kept and well fed. And I had read that the reason this place was up on real estate was it was sold out as a barn area during the non-summer months, and once it was summer again, the rights went back to the original owners so they could make profit off of a summer camp for kids, which was interesting. And I just went around and checked out some of the horses and said hi. I wasn't too keen on this place, and I already felt like I was not going to go with it the second I arrived, but I still wanted to give it a shot, and I did have a fun time looking around. It was very pretty. The view of the ocean pretty much from every angle of the island was one of my favorite things. There was one large outdoor arena. I didn't see any indoor arenas. Frankly, I saw like 2-3 indoor spaces, but there were a bunch of large pastures and lots of different areas to sit and relax, and it just looked like a very peaceful place. And there was a main area with what looked like a quote-unquote hayloft, but not a loft. I don't really know how to explain it, but I did end up finding the owner. I think she was the owner. I'm not sure, but I ended up talking to her, and she was very nice. She showed me some of the papers of the place and explained to me the whole summer camp ordeal and how the ownership would just transfer right back to her once the summer months started, which I completely understood, but it definitely wasn't what I was looking for because, I'm looking for a permanent facility, not a 75% of the year mine facility. But she was very helpful, and she gave me directions around the place and introduced me to a few of the staff members and the horses that were around, and everybody seemed very, very friendly, and I didn't end up getting to know anyone, but she did explain to me everybody's work ethic and stuff, so she was very detail heavy, and I was very happy with that. I thanked her and just went on my way around the property once again, and there was a tiny stable with 3 stalls, and I went over and I just greeted some of the horses. They were very, very pretty, as you can tell. I do love just saying hi to any horse that I see. As long as I have permission, of course, which I did, so don't worry. I ended up looking at one of the outer pastures, which was smaller than the rest, but had a few horses in there, and one foal, which I thought was really cute, and I just went ahead and took a look at all of them, and then went down my way down the path, and I was pretty confused when I went down the path, and then I was like, wait, this is a summer camp, of course, because there were, I don't remember, 5-6 cabins littered around the area, and a campfire, obviously, and I'm assuming the cabins were repurposed during the rest of the year as staff houses or owner houses, which the buildings seemed to be in good condition as the place was just constructed recently, but I still did not feel like it was the place for me, even though it was pretty and had a pretty good price point. I didn't want a 75% own of an area, and here's my pros and cons list. So the pros is that it's right next to moorland and it's very easy to travel. The price point was relatively low, and all of the staff and people that I met seemed friendly. The horses seemed to be well taken care of, and there was a lot of pasture space. The arena was pretty big, and everybody seemed just genuinely friendly. The cons, however, were that I wouldn't get full ownership of the place, and I would have to move somewhere during the summer, which would be a whole nother issue. There was only one indoor area, and it only had 3 stalls. The other indoor buildings were all cabins, which could be repurposed throughout the year, an outdoor hayloft combined with a tack room. There was only one arena, and the place was pretty small with a tiny little creek running through it, so I definitely didn't think it would be the place for me. But I still enjoyed checking it out and getting to greet all of the people and horses there. So this last place was literally last minute in the most real way possible, because as I was driving back to the SEC, I saw an ad that Dundle Stables was going up for sale, and I was just like, you know what, let's check it out. It couldn't hurt. I'd been to Dundle a few times. I've shown there a lot before. I like it. It's pretty. It's a nice barn, really, and I went ahead and I greeted the owner, and she was very nice. I asked her why they were selling, and she said that she just didn't have the time on her hands to hold the place up anymore, which was understandable, so I just asked her about the property and some directions. She gave me a few directions. She basically just told me about the small drive to the large outdoor arena that they have access to. So I thanked her and I just decided to look around a bit. Now, Dundle Stables is a little bit different as the barn is quite small. It's only got 2 aisles, I think I saw in it. I really only poked my head in. I didn't actually take that long of a look. And there's a small pasture on the other side of the stables, which didn't seem like a lot of space to me. There was, however, an owner's home, which is definitely one of my priorities, so that was good. There was another smaller pasture a little bit of the ways down with these adorable horses in it, so I had to go say hi, obviously. They were very, very pretty, and they were very sweet. Anyways, I ended up making the drive up to the Dundle Arena, and it wasn't that far, but I feel like it would definitely be a commitment to have to ride over every single time you wanted to jump. And here's where I made my pros and cons list. So the pros are that it's a foresty location, and I do like a lot of vegetation. It's right next to a town, so there will be plenty of lesson students and new opportunities. The arena is very large, but the cons definitely outweighed the pros, as Dundle is nowhere near central Jorvik at all, so it would be not very convenient to get around. The barn is pretty small, there aren't a lot of pastures, and the price point was really high for the quality of the area. But I did enjoy checking it out, but I really lost hope after this because this was the last area, or so it seemed. Practically the minute I got back to the SEC, one of my coworkers told me that Miss Silverglade had something to say to me, and I was a little bit scared, and my first thought was, am I getting fired? But I wasn't getting fired, and I went up to talk to her, and I was still feeling pretty bad considering I had just gone out to look for facilities and struck out everywhere, but I still put on my poker face and said hi to her and asked why she needed to see me. And in short, she gave me some pretty amazing news. She told me that the land she owned, or quote-unquote, the old racetrack that she owned, she was putting up for sale, but she didn't want just anyone to be able to purchase it. She was looking for specific buyers, and that she had heard about my whole mishap, and she essentially offered me to tour the property, and that if I were to consider buying it, I would get a hefty discount on the area due to my years of work for her. And let me tell you, I was quite literally in shock because the racetrack is beautiful. And she did specify that it would no longer be used as a racetrack, but I could repurpose it and use the racetrack trail as pretty much like a pony ride area or a trail ride area for people who pay, and I was just so grateful, and I thanked her so many times, and I was like, should I go tour it now? And she was like, yeah, go ahead. And I thanked her so many times, and I headed into the barn to grab one of the ponies who was supposed to have been ridden that day, but wasn't, and so I decided that for her exercise, I would just take her down and walk over to the racetrack since it was only a 10-minute hack, and I definitely don't regret taking her with me because she kept me very calm with how excited I was touring the property. By the time I made my way over, it was already pretty dark at that point, around 6 p.m. I think, and I did take a few clips the next day of the racetrack during the day just to show off its natural beauty, but when I rode down there, I was just awestruck still at the opportunity that I was getting, which is once in a lifetime, and I really still couldn't believe it. Obviously, the racetrack is beautiful. I've been there several times since I've been working at the SEC. It was revamped 1.5 years ago, I think, and it looks absolutely gorgeous, and I would kill to call this place my own. It seriously is so beautiful, and just has such a cozy, welcoming feel to it. And it's in an open space while also feeling enclosed enough to a good amount. But I just went around the property and took in everything. There's obviously the main racetrack with the large arena in the middle. There's a trailer park and a car park on the side of the racetrack, which is very helpful and makes my life a lot easier. There's 3 barns. There's the large outdoor barn, which has 7 stalls and leads into the large indoor barn, and there's a smaller outdoor barn further up the hill from the racetrack. But really, everything is beautiful, and there's just so much that this place has to offer. There's so much detail and life and just beauty in this place, and I was just trying not to have a mental breakdown while I was walking through. Just the sheer thought that I could call this place my own was enough to send me out on a limb. But as I was touring the place, I was really just taking in all my surroundings. There was a large round pen for lunging, which I absolutely lost it at, because it was just another detail that just kept sealing the deal for me. There were a ton of people out and about the next day when I was recording, and I got to meet a few of the staff, which was really nice to do. There was an on-site vet who had been working there for about his entire career, and even before the racetrack was revamped, so I got to greet him and ask him about the place and the papers and everything. And he was very friendly. He didn't mind the questions. He genuinely seemed to like talking to me, and it meant a lot. He told me about the amount of horses he'd seen come and go, as the racetrack hadn't been used as an actual racetrack in a few years. But he said that it was a repurposed home as of right now, and the Baroness was looking for buyers who would be interested in making it their own facility. So I thanked him and went on my way to continue exploring the rest of the facility. I passed by a very beautiful statue of the racing thoroughbred from a few years ago, and it was just jaw-dropping. I walked through the car park just to see how big it was, and there was enough room to fit 3 trailers, and I was so happy about that. I went into a smaller area with a few other buildings, which I believe some of the buildings were to store tack and feed and possibly clothing, as well as home for the staff members, and I'm assuming the on-site vet. There were picnic tables to eat food and a little stand-up food bar in the back, which I just thought was so cute, and I really loved it. There was also a small little shop that had a few helmets and boots just in case you forgot your own, and of course the racetrack, which I had to run down with my tiny pony, because who would I be if I didn't? And it was just so fun to canter down a racetrack on a tiny pony. I checked out the inside of the arena, and the footing was very well done. The natural grass definitely added a touch, and it was just pretty. There was a large bleacher area which would come in a big handy for filming, instructing, and for showing, and it just kept getting better and better as I crossed another viewing platform and over to something that almost made me cry. There was a small home on the outer side of the facility, right around the fountain, and I just stopped in front of it, and I just freaked out, and I tried not to cry really, really hard, because it was perfect, and it was everything that I wanted. And I realized there was even more, and I went up a little pathway onto a flat area where there was another vet station and a small outdoor barn with 3 stalls and a tiny tack room, and it would be perfect for either injured or sick horses or really anything like that. There was also a far trail further up the way, which could definitely use some work to turn it into a cross-country track, but it wouldn't be too expensive to fix up, which was really good, and I got to go up it and explore the next day, and it really was beautiful. And this is where I made my pros and cons list. So the pros were that this place wasn't too far from home, so I wouldn't be missing a lot. It's very close to central 𝘰𝑗𝑒𝑗𝑎 and it's easy to get around. The price point was pretty on the mid side, considering I'd get a discount. It's beautiful, just jaw-dropping. There's a lot of barn space and a lot of pasture space, which I didn't get to film, but the pastures are just past the barn and they are humongous. There's also some smaller dirt pastures for maybe more isolated horses. There's a car park. There's a lot of trail space and it has the potential for an amazing cross-country course. There's a round pen and the arena is massive. There's 2 viewing areas and an on-site vet, along with anything extra, like the food area, and the on-site home is just gorgeous. Now, the cons, I really couldn't find anything. I was just so, hit by this place. It was just so beautiful. And I was just praying and praying that I would be selected as the buyer for this gorgeous, gorgeous racetrack. The very next day, while I had been walking around the property and filming it during the day, I was called over by the barn manager who would soon be retiring after the place was sold, and she went ahead and she said that the Baroness had selected me as the person who she would sell the place to. And I was ecstatic, to say the least. And she explained to me that the paperwork would get to me and I would just have to sign essentially, and that once I finished signing, everything would be all set up. Anyways, since I got the place, I'm going to be renaming it, obviously. And the name I've been thinking of choosing is Weeping Willow Estates. And I'm really, really hoping that I can get everything set up and running soon. But the facility does need a little bit of work, and I'm going to need to move in a bunch of horses and definitely go horse shopping for more lesson horses and get the cross-country course up and running, which will take a very, very long time, but it will 100% be worth it in the end. Anyways, that's all for today. Thank you so much for sitting around for 35 minutes and listening to me rant about different places. Thank you for all the support on my last video. It means the world to me. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. Bye!